filling in for Mr. Nielsen this evening, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Governing Board to order at 6 p.m. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rader,
Present.
Mr. Nielsen, Mrs. Contreras,
Here.
Mrs. Reyes,
Here.
Mrs. Soshanek.
Thank you very much. If you'll please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we'll take a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Would any member of the board like to make a statement this evening?
I have none.
Yes, Ms. Reyes.
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, then moving on, Dr. Freeman, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Rader, members of the board and community. Buenos tardes a todos, and good evening, and welcome everybody to the 2021-22 school year. I'm excited and grateful for our returning students and teachers and support staff and leadership team. For all of those of you who are joining Littleton for the first time, you've chosen to be part of a team dedicated to hope as we turn the page to put another year, or to put at least last year of chaos behind us. Littleton ESD is a Kids at Hope school district, and that means that all children possess treasures and that the hope they have for their futures depends greatly upon the caring adults in their community, their schools, and their homes. We have a caring and knowledgeable staff dedicated to our mission. They make daily extraordinary efforts to serve the community, and that's what you can expect from your community schools. Other for-profit schools popping up in our district serve only certain children, not the whole community. Their assets belong to their owners, but our assets belong to our community. When we ask for bond support, it's for the community's assets. We need permission from our community, and they do not. We have a debt limit, they do not. And we've served this community for over 100 years. They have not. Our instructional systems are designed to have a significant positive impact on academic achievement. Our instructional calendar is designed to reduce debilitating effects of the summer slide, and that's why it's so important for our families to make a commitment to stay in the Littleton district system, so these positive effects can accumulate in student performance. To meet the demands of a new era in schooling, we've committed to school program choice options to make our students' classwork more meaningful, to help prepare students for productive lives. We partner with the high school and career and technical districts. These partnerships help create extraordinary field-based learning opportunities for Littleton learners, which we hope to expand by joining Westmec this fall at no cost to our voters. We know that you have many choices when it comes to the education of your children, and we're pleased you're placing your confidence in the caring adults in our school district. This summer, over 500 kindergarten through 7th grade students attended Littleton's Rolling Into Learning program held at Country Place Leadership Academy. Students engaged in a variety of interactive activities focused on literacy and mathematics. Students work with their teachers and their peers to learn and apply the skills. The summer program concluded with a celebration at Jake's Unlimited. Based on participation, achievement data, and feedback from students, families, and teachers, the Rolling Into Learning program was a great success. We offer other kinds of support that are essential for students to continue to learn and grow, such as social services, socio-emotional support, and nutrition. Our summer meal program continued to have good participation. We served 31,000 meals thus far. These numbers include summer school students, meals delivered by buses, students at the ACES program, and anyone else 18 years or younger in our community. We're going to continue to serve meals at Country Place Leadership Academy, Estrella and Littleton STEM Academies, and Eva's Bistro until the end of this week. Then we'll start switching over to the regular school program. And good news from the Department of Agriculture and Department of Education, we'll be able to continue under summer feeding rules this year, which means we're not going to be tracking whether students are free, reduced, or full pay. We'll be providing lunch for everybody at our schools. We'd like to thank Southwest Food Service Excellence for their continuous commitment to assisting our community in meeting the nutritional needs in a safe manner. As you probably know, some of our staff never leave for the summer. It's their busiest time of year, and others return to work way in advance of the students. Professional development kicked off yesterday with a retreat for leadership to focus efforts on maximizing the impact of professional learning communities and goals. Today is the first day of our new teachers orientation and other activities at the Fine Arts Cafetorium. Thank you to the curriculum instruction staff and everyone else who helped to assist with this work that started very early in the spring. By the way, thank you to our HVAC technicians who are responding to the air conditioning emergencies around the district as we open up. I'm sure everybody's feeling the humidity as well as our air conditioners. So we're glad they're able to fix those issues and keep things moving along. We don't have to move our meetings. Returning teachers will join on July 19th, 20th, or 21st, depending on their years of service, and we have a full agenda for them. Teachers are getting ready to meet their students and their families during Meet the Teacher Night, and that will be on the evening of July 26th. We're excited to hold this event in person once more, as we know that learning and support are more effective when we can interact in person. Consistent with CDC guidelines, anyone not fully vaccinated should wear a mask. Please look for our principal's welcome back messages and information on opening events, and one of the places you can find those messages is from your principal is by going to our website and visiting the school's homepage. Our theme for this coming year is We Believe. We believe in Littleton, and there's nothing that our staff and students can't do with the help and the support of everybody in the community. This year, we're building on the one that just passed, and as leaders, our job is to find a way, and we believe we can provide those opportunities for learning success for everybody while renewing our commitment to health and well-being of our students and staff. We continue to monitor the data regarding the spread of the virus and new variants to stay on top of recommendations from our health authorities. Our mitigation plans are worked on carefully in a collaborative manner. They'll be discussed on the agenda later today and reviewed again before school starts in a couple weeks. We're excited about finally turning the page and starting in person with the first day of school on July 28th. In closing, I'd like to thank Dr. and Mrs. Sagerman for their donation of National Junior Honor Society pins and signature book for the induction ceremonies at Littleton STEM Academy, and to Beezer Homes for their continuing donations to our mutual impact agreement as they build new homes in our attendance area. And Mr. Rader, that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Next on our agenda is the program showcase. Ms. Vandewater.
Member Rader, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, I am excited to present to you our program showcase for this evening. Tonight, Mr. Charlie Blanton will showcase the Littleton School District's Washington, D.C. and Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia student experience. We have the great privilege of partnering with World Strides for student and staff travel. World Strides is passionate about student travel, and their educational travel company is the first to be accredited as an actual school. They have approximately 450,000 students travel with them annually, and among them are our Littleton students. A few of the long-term benefits of student travel include 92% of students report travel has a lasting impact on their worldview, 97% of students reported an increase in self-confidence, and 62% feel that an out-of-class experience has a most lasting impact. Here to share with the governing board and community our student and staff travel is Principal of Fine Arts Academy, Mr. Charlie Blanton. Welcome, Mr. Blanton.
Good evening. Good evening, President Nielsen, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, executive team, and members of the Littleton District. I'm really happy to be here tonight. It gives me a great pleasure to report back on our trip to Washington, D.C. We went on June 1st to June 4th. In all, there were 18 of us. There were 14 students from our schools, and then there were 3 chaperones and myself, so that makes 18. I just want to let you know that our students made me very, very proud to be from this district. They were curious, they were respectful, they were quite knowledgeable, sometimes more than me, which was a little bit hard of a pill to swallow when we're standing at these historic sites and I can't remember the stuff that I learned when I was their age, but they were rocking it. So I was really, really proud of our students for the way they behaved themselves. They carried themselves very well at all times, and it was just a real pleasure. And I have just a few slides for you, just so you can see. We enjoyed some beautiful weather. We saw a little precipitation, but it wasn't too much. There you see us in front of the White House. That was an exciting event for us. Next slide, please. We went to see Mount Vernon, where George Washington lived, and we also got to see the Washington Monument. This was an interesting little compilation of photos. We, in addition to seeing the Lincoln Memorial, we saw Ford's Theater, where Lincoln was shot, and directly across the street is where he actually died. And so that group picture in the middle is the building that he died in. I think this was a change in plans or something happened. We ended up going to Colonial Williamsburg, and it was such a beautiful day. It was definitely one of the highlights of our visit. We got to walk around and explore on our own, and the kids were, very interested in going into all the exhibits, and we got to learn a lot from the people who worked there and play the part of, the original settlers. So it was a really great experience. It was a beautiful place, beautiful day. We had a great time there. So it was fun to go into the governor's palace and see how, they lived back then. But even more fun, out back, you can see there's this maze, and the bushes are about 6 feet tall, so you really can't see over them. And the kids had fun, and it really wasn't that easy to maneuver. Kids did find some tricks that they would share with each other, but we stood above them. We went up the hill and watched them running through the maze. And so there were times on that trip where we just actually really had fun together. Students made new friends with students from other schools. It was just a great time. We also went to Jamestown. We saw the replicas of those ships, and we saw a lot of different, craftsmen showing us how they lived and worked during that time. So that was pretty interesting. Again, the kids had great questions. They listened. They were very attentive. Thank you. Go ahead, next slide. So I did say there were 4 adults. So it was myself. This is Sandra Matadamas, and she is a teacher in the district, and she accompanied us as a chaperone and as a parent. Best chaperone ever. Next slide. We also got to see the US Capitol, but we couldn't go in. I mean, some buildings were just not accessible during this time, but it didn't really matter. The kids really enjoyed the tour. Our tour guide from World Strides is very knowledgeable, and she was good at telling us stories or making it interesting. So it was very enlightening to students. Even though we didn't go in, we still learned a lot and enjoyed the trip. Next slide. And So I just want to say thank you to a few people because, you know, Littleton Education Foundation, they provided scholarships. So I believe everyone went on a scholarship this year. So that was huge. That was a great thing. So thank you to the foundation. And thank you to the chaperones for coming with us. Our parents, our chaperones were so engaged with students at all times. They kept the conversations going at all times. And that's when we really got to learn just how intelligent these kids are because of the adults talking to them, kept them engaged and asking questions and sharing stories. It was awesome. And of course, thank you to the Littleton District Governing Board. We couldn't do that without your support. We're very, very fortunate to be able to take our students on trips like this. You know, traveling out of state is a big deal. Many students had never done that before. So to have this opportunity, we're very fortunate. So thank you for all your support. And just one, I think this is a ritual now to share a favorite monument and comments. So I had to call Ms. Matadamas and ask her what her daughter had thought. But, you know, she said her daughter just thought the whole trip was adventurous and full of learning. So out of the mouth of our children, that was her favorite. All right, any questions or comments?
Any questions or comments from the board?
No, thank you for the overview. It is a good thing when they can travel and if it's their last or first experience, it's forever changing. So thank you for presenting.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo those comments. Experiential learning activities are so invaluable for our students. And every time I see this presentation, my only thought is ever, how can we get more students to be able to participate in this wonderful activity? So thank you so much for accompanying our students, and thank you to everyone, including and especially the foundation, for your support in making this happen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
just want to
Blanton.
piggyback really quick and just say thank you again. Those pictures were awesome and definitely an experience for those students to remember.
I have a couple thousand more on my phone if you ever have some spare time.
All right. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Our next item, Ms. Vanderwater, actually, did you have anything else to add?
I just wanted to add that we had the great opportunity, several exhibits were closed in Washington, D.C., like the Holocaust Museum. So World Strides was very gracious and supporting us in allowing the students to experience Colonial Williamsburg. And we have heard from students and parents that they'd like us to consider adding that to trips in the future because the children really, really enjoyed it. So we will do that.
Wonderful. Appreciate the adaptability there to make that experience happen for our students.
Thank you.
With that, call to the public. Madam Secretary, do we have anybody this evening? No call to the public. Consent agenda. Would any member of the board like to pull an item from the consent agenda?
I would not.
All right. May I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I can motion as soon as I can read it. Hang on.
Here, what I'll do is I'll move the governing board approve the items submitted for consent.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm sorry, Ada, are we
Aye.
doing a roll call vote? I apologize. It's been a little while since I facilitated a meeting. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes.
Aye.
Thank you. Our next item is a public hearing for the instructional time and expenditure budget for fiscal year 2021-22. This time we'll recess for our public hearing. Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Rader, members of the board. One of the bills that was passed and signed into law this past session was House Bill 2862. It started out to deal with school districts' ability to shift back to remote learning if there were further outbreaks of communicable disease viruses, and ended up with a lot of other interests chiming in for greater flexibility in learning models. So the bill now is written pretty broadly, and we just received guidance from the Department of Ed yesterday. It gives the board a great deal of latitude in determining what the instructional time in a school district should look like, but there are requirements in other parts of Title 15, and the one that's important to our proposal is a minimum of 890 hours in a school year. So you'll see we're proposing two things to be adopted as Littleton's instructional time model. This will be the first of two hearings for those. If you take that 890 hours and divide it by 180 days, that comes out to be about 5 hours a day. At 5 hours a day times 180 days, you would get 900 hours per year, which is just over the minimum required. And our proposal is going to be that our Littleton online learning opportunity is just that, 5 hours a day for 180 days. But for our in-person learning, what we did is a couple different calculations and made the determination that because we have a 7-hour day for our regular day, we would meet the minimum criteria prescribed in statute within 128 days. We, of course, don't want to recommend a 128-day school year. So what we are recommending is that the currently adopted calendar not be changed, that it has 136 regular days, which exceeds that minimum by a little quick math in my head, 8 days. And then we have 44 early release days, and that includes the parent conference days and days preceding holidays, all of those. So what we would like to submit after the second hearing to the Department of Ed is that our 136 full days become our calendar of state days to satisfy the requirement of House Bill 2862, and the remaining 44 early release days would be district days. Those two things together would constitute the current instructional calendar and not require any change in our instructional calendar as far as the delivery of service and programs to our kids in our community. And since this is a hearing, there's no action required at this time, but it is an opportunity for the board to think about and discuss, or if they just want to think and discuss at the next hearing, we can do that too. We can also take public comment at this hearing or the next. I don't think we had any public comment turned in. Not so far, but we may by our next meeting. So we'd be happy to entertain any discussion or ideas, Mr. President, about how the board wants to move forward with satisfying the requirements of House Bill 2862.
Dr. Freeman, this is Kathy. I just have a quick clarity. So right now we are doing, what are we doing right now?
Right now, the calendar that's been approved by the board is 180 school days. That was the old rule. And we had to meet a minimum number of hours, which we had exceeded. The new number is 890 hours. And so we simply took the length of our 7-hour school day and divided it into that minimum to get the 128. We have 136 of those, so we're well over. That would be 8 times 7. Who knows their 7s or 8s really well? 56 hours extra plus another 10, 66 hours extra. So we're simply proposing this to meet the criteria for this new law. So right now we have 136 7-hour days and 44 5-hour days, or a little less than 5-hour days, where we do professional development and some teaming with our teachers. So we think even though this is a new law, we don't have to change our instructional calendar at all, Ms. Reyes. It's just going to be what we submit to the state for our calendar will be for those state days to meet that requirement, the regular full days, not the half days.
So as a parent, if I should not have any concern that my child is receiving equal to the same amount of educational teaching.
That's right. It's going to be the exactly same as the board has approved in the past. And it's going to, basically every early release day we have is above and beyond the requirements of the state. And certainly, if we're going to help close the achievement gap, then English language arts and math, we can use the time.
Oh, absolutely. No, that helps clarify it. Thank you.
Ms. Contreras, did you have any questions or comments this evening?
No, I don't have any questions. Just thank you, Mrs. Reyes, for asking your questions, because that helped clarify as well for me. But I like that. I like the idea of it staying the same and just allowing for that extra opportunity to close that gap with students and have that time with them.
Thank you. I guess my question comes with the parity between the online learning instructional calendar and the traditional in-person learning calendar, if you will. So with the online, there's no early release. It's just 5 hours, 5 days a week, correct?
Yeah, the online, if we follow all of the rules set forth for documentation of attendance and time on task, it has a little more onerous requirement for documentation. So we want to keep that as simple and straightforward as possible. Kids actually have to record how much time they're spending, and so keeping that straightforward, they can, I think, plus or minus different days as long as they're getting their hours in. But we need to document all of their time. For attendance in school, we take attendance twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And so we have essentially a half-day attendance. We use those 2 times, especially the time in the morning, to check on the welfare of kids. If kids are not in school and the parents haven't called, we call the families to make sure that they know where they are. So we're assuming custodial responsibility when the kids are in person, that we're not assuming when kids are online. And because the rules are different, we thought it made sense for the hours to be different.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that clarification. I don't think I have any additional questions or comments at this time. And there's no public comment. Is that correct? All right. So this will come back before the board at another public hearing. Moving on to our next public hearing, it's on the FY22 Expenditure Budget. Mr. French.
Thank you, Member Rader. Members of the Governing Board, Dr. Freeman, Littleton Community. This public hearing is being conducted for consideration of residents and taxpayers of the Littleton Elementary School District community to present the proposed expenditure budget for fiscal year 2021-2022 and the truth in taxation. In the regular meeting following the hearing, an agenda item will be introduced to adopt the estimated truth in taxation levy and the expenditure budget. When looking at the budget life cycle, there are many dates and milestones the district adheres to. We begin looking at the budget in the spring in preparation to bring a proposed budget to the board in June. This brings us to this evening's public hearing and budget adoption. The Auditor General's office has not released the new budget forms as of this evening, so we will be adopting our budget on the preliminary forms provided. At our prior meeting, we discussed briefly that the district will be allowed to revise the budget prior to September 15th because of the late legislative session this year. ARS 15905Q allows districts to revise their budgets by September 15th for changes in law that impact budget calculations in the adopted budget. In a typical year, the first revision would happen in December if necessary. Other dates down the timeline include October, which would be when tax bills get mailed out to individuals and businesses within the district boundaries, which include the primary and secondary tax rates, and this will be discussed later on in the presentation. The district's last opportunity to revise the budget is in May, and the annual financial report, which is a report on the budget expenditures, is due in October. These are the budget formula factors used in creating the proposed budget. These were conservative amounts that were in fact signed into law with the passing of the K-12 budget bill. Our first estimate is an increase of 275 ADM for fiscal year 22. We have begun to see a strong enrollment push for the district since returning to in-person learning in March, and the district has also seen a strong kinder enrollment for fiscal year 22. For these reasons and the strong residential growth the district is experiencing, we are expecting a strong recovery from our enrollment decline last year. The legislative session provided an increase of 1.97% to the base support level, which equals $84.92 per weighted ADM. The base support level is extremely important to the budget formula. It will be multiplied by the weighted ADM to determine the general budget limit. The transportation support level was also increased from $2.24 to $2.27 per mile. This amount is used in the calculation of the transportation support level and is ultimately rolled into the M&O budget. Other items that were passed and will be included in the district's budget revision are some Group B weights. The first Group B weight was an add-on for gifted education of 0.007. There was also an increase for specifically self-contained classroom and children from 5.833 to 5.988, and an increase in Group B weight for developmental delays from 0.003 to 0.093. Here's a review of the last 8 years ADM along with current year projections. Due to the current year funding, the district is required to estimate and project what our FY22 ADM will be and build the proposed and adopted budget on those projections. What you see here is the district's estimate based on the information we have available today, which is an increase of 5.21%. Looking at the rest of the chart, we see consistent growth with only 2016 and 2021 showing declines. This slide reviews our M&O budget calculations. The base support level and transportation revenue control limit are added together to get a revenue control limit of $33,263,000. The M&O override is $4,679,000, which is a decrease of $471,000 due to it being calculated on prior years, which is FY21's 100th day. We are currently estimating carry forward from FY21 of $693,000. This number can still be a bit fluid through encumbrance period, which is August 31st. Encumbrance period is the time the district has to close the financial books for fiscal year 21. If we look further, there is a transfer to the Energy Savings Fund of $199,000. This is the same as the prior 3 years, and the additional Prop 123 money of $367,000. Providing an overall FY22 general budget limit of $38,804,000. This is an increase of $1,360,000 from our last revised budget in fiscal year 21. This slide is comparing the base support level, the average daily membership, or ADM, the weighted student count, M&O override, and overall M&O budget by fiscal year. You'll notice the increased base support level and increased anticipated student count will result in a larger budget in FY22. You'll also notice that the M&O override, like I mentioned earlier, is going down because it is calculated on last year's ADM, not FY22's projected ADM. A review of our district's assessed valuation history shows in 2014 through 2016 a moderate increase in property values after the recession, and exceptional growth from 2017 through 2021. Annual growth for existing properties is limited to 5% annually per Prop 117. However, growth from reclassification of property and construction is not limited. This upswing in value is credited to new construction in the district and the conversion of vacant land to residential property. With a higher number of building permits in Avondale, it is expected the district will continue to see strong assessed value growth in the next few years as well. There are two types of tax rates this evaluation applies to. The primary tax rate, which funds M&O, capital, and adjacent ways, while the secondary tax rate funds voter-approved bonds and overrides. The tax rates will be discussed on the next slide. This slide gives us an 8-year look back at tax rates for the district. Using preliminary calculations, the district is estimating the tax rate for fiscal year 22 to have a slight decrease of just over 4 cents, approximately 4.2. For a $100,000 home, this would be $550.56 in taxes annually. Values of homes for tax purposes have been increasing, with the average value in 2021 of $120,918, according to the Arizona Department of Revenue. This would be an average tax of $665.73, approximately a $27.23 a year increase for the average home. The Truth in Taxation statute deals only with the amounts levied for adjacent ways. It is funded on the primary tax rate and is authorized by the governing board. Littleton has set a levy for adjacent ways of $625,000 in fiscal year 22. Our publication for Truth in Taxation requires the district to post the levy amount for a $100,000 home with the levy and without. Without the levy, the rate would be 0. And with the levy, the $100,000 home would be $20.15. This is an $11.20 decrease on the $100,000 home from last year. This was calculated in the combined tax rate on the previous slide and still accounts for a 4-cent decrease to the overall tax rate. At this point, I would be happy to answer any questions that the public or the board has.
Any questions or comments? Ada,
That's just a lot to take in, so give me a minute.
of course.
Thank you for all the information. I don't have any questions right now.
Yeah, at this time, I don't think I have any either.
All right, thank you. Ada, was there any questions from the public?
No, Mr. President.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we will close our public hearings and reconvene until our regular meeting. Can I get a motion and a second to reconvene?
I'll make a motion, the board convene into regular session.
And I will second that.
Thank you. Ada, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Our next item this evening will be the adoption of the expenditure budget for FY21-22. Mr. French.
Member Rader, members of the governing board, this evening we are asking that the board adopt the expenditure budget as proposed.
This is Kathy. I'll move the governing board adopt the budget as proposed.
And this is Sarah. I'll second that.
Ada, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes.
Aye.
Sorry, Mrs. Reyes, I was apparently going to vote for you. I was so excited about the expenditure budget. With that, the motion passes by a vote of 3-0. And with that, we'll move on to revisions to exhibits JQEA student fees. Ms. Chizzy.
Mr. President, Governing Board, I would like to call your attention, wow, to a blank screen, there we go, to a proposed change to Exhibit JQEA, Student Fees, Fines, and Charges. Excited to tell you that this year we would like to offer parents affordable accidental damage insurance protection plan for the student devices. This protection is optional for families that want to participate. Attached to this item, you will also see that we are proposing this optional fee at $29 per student per device. The way we arrived at $29 was we compared similar plans from third parties and considered the price of a new device, all while trying to make it cost-effective for our families. We are proposing that families are offered device protection at the start of each school year and throughout the year as we welcome new families to our district. How we propose it works is that families will have 14 days from the date of signing out a laptop to purchase the protection plan. Families will have options. They can pay by cash, check, and eventually we're going to set it up so they can pay through My School Bucks, which is how they pay for their lunches currently. The funds collected will be used to order parts and replacement devices that we will stock so that our own technicians can quickly make repairs in-house without the cost or time associated with shipping. I have also attached for your convenience a flyer, a draft of a flyer, that will be used to promote this program so that our families know about it and help families understand exactly what damage will be covered. It's all listed out right on the flyer so that there is no question. And I would like you to know that the most common damage we have seen over the years is to keyboards, screens, and chargers, with the average repair cost much higher than $29. We believe that selling the protection up front instead of going after the money at the end will help create efficiencies and get the laptops back in the hands of the students much more quickly than we have been able to. This is an information item, so we do not need a motion, but are there any questions or comments on this idea?
Any questions or comments from the board?
This is Kathy. I just have a quick question. So I am a parent. I'm not going to buy the $29. How do you recover the money from me at the end?
Mr. President, Mrs. Reyes, that's a great question. We make a lot of phone calls, a lot of chasing it down, and sometimes knocking on the doors, really trying to recover those fees, and that's really what we're trying to avoid with this program.
If I ask you how much you recovered, would you be able to provide it? How much of that money at the end of the year were you really actually able to recover?
It's usually less than half.
Yeah, I would. Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We have LoJack on the computers.
Yes, we have lots of tools to help us. We can send messages out to the computers when we don't have them recovered. We can lock them. We can see where they are anywhere in the world. And we do spend quite a bit of time, the schools, along with the IT department, because generally we have awesome community members who do take good care of our resources, but we think this would be a much more efficient way to go after it.
Thank you.
How many people bought the policy in the past?
I will tell you that last year we offered through a third party, and we had 952 policies sold last year.
That's not bad.
No, and it was kind of a late launch, which is why I wanted to bring this to your attention tonight so that tomorrow we can start promoting it and letting our families know it's available. We do get asked for it quite often from our families. Can we purchase some protection? So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Ms. Contreras, did you have any questions?
I do not. I'm a parent as well, so I did purchase it for my 3 kids, and I used the third party last year, and so it was pretty simple. So but this seems like a simpler, more efficient way. So yeah, no questions. Just thank you.
Thank you. I guess my question, so you had mentioned this was a third party last year, but this is actually going to be a district administered program this year.
Correct.
So, so was the $29 a approximately what the third party charged, or how was that dollar amount derived?
It's exactly the same. We didn't raise it or lowered it. We looked at a couple of third parties, and that's what our parents were paying last year. So we left it there with the hopes that we have a baseline data to see. We would prefer to be able to go down, not have to go up. So we need a year to watch it.
Okay, so I appreciate that explanation. Is there any additional administration that goes into administering what amounts to like an insurance program?
The difference is the collection of the money. So that will be people that are trained in cash handling at all the school sites as well as the district office. And we really want to automate it through my school bucks.
Okay. And then I guess just as far as the flyer, as I look at this, and I know this was just an initial draft that you put together as a demonstration of some of the marketing that you would be using. But some of the things that are listed on here, for example, battery failure, or hard drive failure. I mean, would a family typically be held accountable for that, or would that be under the warranty of the machine itself?
President Rader, great question. Typically, we would not charge them for those things, but we wanted to put them on there to avoid the questions, so that they wouldn't worry that if there was failure with the unit that they were paying for it.
Okay. Well, certainly, I think it's a great program. I'll be interested to see kind of how it goes for let's say our trial year, if you will, of us administering it ourselves. See kind of what the balances look like. I know you said it was set at $29 per device, just kind of based on maybe what a larger company was charging. I mean, is there any risk to the district that, man, we have a really terrible year and lots of kids break their computers and the $29 isn't going to cover it? So, I mean, it's an insurance program, so you collect $10,000, but dang it, we had $20,000 worth of breaks this year that we've now guaranteed that we're going to cover for families.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we need a baseline year. This was requested by the technicians who wanted to remove the shipping costs that weren't to us, to the third party, so we removed that. And they're getting super skilled. We're in about year 10 of repairing devices, so they can do it quickly. They feel confident at this price point, but we'll be watching it. Mr. Verrill and I will be monthly interested, and our comment to the team when they proposed this to us was, we're gonna be sitting here next year going, woohoo, that was great, or oh my goodness, we're going back to a third party or outsource. We'll be really monitoring it, because we had weeks of discussion around this.
Back office is about the same.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate the explanation. I don't have any further questions at this time. Our item 14, dynamic digital instruction models and safe return to in-person learning. Oh, excuse me, I skipped item 13, digital display at Buckeye Road and Avondale Boulevard. Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Rader, members of the board. So I had put some information out that we were hoping to be able to get a digital display at Buckeye Road and Avondale up and running, and this had been a result of some of the board's discussion over a year ago, as we anticipated a loss in enrollment to a charter school opening up right on Buckeye Road, right here between our district office and our Fine Arts Academy. And like many things during the pandemic, took much longer than anticipated, and in fact, parts are on back order again this year. So we had done the planning of the superstructure and ordering of a display. That's been delayed. Right now, we're hoping to have that up and installed second or third week in August. And the way that we've paid for that is out of the regular district capital by splitting it into 2 fiscal years. So about 90,000 in last fiscal year and 90,000 in this fiscal year. Because it's capital funds, it doesn't diminish any of our operating revenue, making it possible for us to continue with our programs. And we thought if we were going to go out like a lot of those companies do and try to buy ad space on TV and those kind of things over time, that would accumulate to quite a big operational cost. If we made a one-time investment in our own display at a major intersection, we could continue to promote the district and its programs continuously. So we did work with the city on the placement of that, and what we learned is there is a visibility triangle that we had to stay out of. It has to do with vehicles being able to corner. There isn't really a criteria for distractibility. That is simply determined by changes in driver behavior at the intersection. So that'll be monitored if there is any apparent impact from before the display is started up to after the display is started up, that we may have to deal with some of those issues. As far as content goes, we have a policy KHC which gives the district guidance on what kind of materials from related organizations and nonprofits that we might share. People probably remember we had at one time proposed being able to lease out space on the sides of our buses, and what we ended up doing is just our own district promotional messages between the carriage of the buses, and that's how we intend to start out, is just promoting the school district. We have had conversations with the city of Avondale about sharing some of the promotion of their activities, their city activities, fiestas, and those kind of things, especially the ones that our students participate in, library programs and those kind of things, which current policy allows us to do. We just have to fill out the form of the request and have it approved before that material is posted. One of the things that we have not done that may be a future item of discussion for the board is if the district wanted to lease or sell any space to anybody that does not already meet the criteria KHC. We've started by doing a little bit of research on what other companies or media agencies might charge for that, and we're in the early stages of investigating. We don't have really any idea or any recommendation what that might be, or if the board would even be interested in having that display become some kind of a revenue generating vehicle for the school district. Right now that's not in our plans. Doesn't mean it couldn't be. What I'd really like to do is get it up and running and get our material on it. What we envision is right now all of the things that you're already seeing in district media, which would include materials from the schools, materials from our social media pages, our good news updates, and all of those things that are currently captured digitally can just be converted to the billboard format. So, if there's some outreach to us from the community, people who'd like to have access to the bulletin board, we can bring that information back to the board. Or if there's any, if the board has interest in trying putting together some kind of policy and standards for making it into a revenue generating vehicle, then we could discuss that in the future. Right now, that's not part of the plan, and I hope that's an overview. I think I touched on the points that we had questions that had come up earlier from members. Happy to entertain further discussion, ideas, concerns, or anything else that might be from members of the board.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. Questions or concerns this evening?
I don't have any questions. It was just good information to have. I was driving by, and at first glance, I was wondering what it was, and at first we were thinking it was something from the raceway that was going up in the corner, and then we realized it was on the Littleton area. So I'm just excited for it to go up, and thank you, Dr. Freeman, for that information.
Dr. Friedman, would the smaller Marquees still stay at the schools?
Mr. Rader, Ms. Reyes, Ms. Contreras, we have built into the capital override budget upgrades to all of the school marquees, so they can be all digital, visual digital messaging, and all controlled from the office, with the idea that we can keep them current. People don't have to go out to the marquee to change them. So we don't consider this sign at this corner to be replacing any of the school level information. Certainly we can have school level information on it. But one of the big differences we realized as charters were popping up is the philosophy of our district has been for our neighborhood schools to be embedded in our neighborhoods. So they're not on main arterials or main thoroughfares. The people who see our school marquees, with the exception of the original Littleton campus, are the people who drive through that neighborhood and the people whose kids are in those schools. And what you see in the commercial for-profit school market is they want to be on main arteries. They have different concerns and different philosophies. So the one piece of land that we had that was on an artery is at the Littleton School, but that's not intended to replace anything that's already part of that school program.
Thank you.
So I do have a couple questions. I don't know if I missed this within your presentation, Dr. Freeman, but how big did you say that the digital display will ultimately be?
That's a great question, Mr. Rader. And we had gone back and forth about the size and looked at the cost, and I didn't bring that information. I'm wondering if, actually, Mr. French now is looking. I'm thinking, is it a 9:16 format? So it's gonna be something like 6 by. Is it in the backup? Hang on. Let me see if I can. Oh, that's not the right.
But it would just be the size of the frame that's currently there, because I also drove by and at first what is that? And then I realized it was some kind of marquee. It's pretty big. I mean, you can see it.
Yeah, the frame was designed to be high enough and far enough from the wall to avoid any kind of vandalism or tagging, and then of course not to obstruct the visual triangle in its setback. I'm looking to see.
No, I mean, we don't need to belabor the point. You can probably get that to me later. So I guess to Kathy's point, I would say it's like a billboard, would be probably a more accurate description of it than a display. And just following up on something else you said you had worked with the city. Were we required to get like a special use permit, or does this sign adhere to the city's digital sign ordinance?
Yes, it was. I don't believe there's a special use, but it was permitted.
Okay, so I mean, the only reason I ask that is because obviously the city has special rules for how frequently messages can change and or the brightness of a sign. I just want to make sure that those are being adhered to mitigate any liability that the district may have if, and hopefully that there's never a serious accident in that intersection, but somebody say, oh, I was distracted by the sign. So I'm glad to hear that that those steps were taken. I guess
I know there was quite a big discussion about the marquee itself, where it was placed, how it was placed, because it is really, I mean, no matter where you're sitting on Buckeye or MC80, it's right there. I mean, it's big. And I know there was a lot of discussion about how bright it was going to be. And you're absolutely right, Mr. Rader. Will it be distracting? And if so, who takes liability for it? So hopefully that was all ironed out, and our insurance policy, if we need one, is updated to, if it is required, to reflect that, because depending on what goes and how much it flashes, I mean, you got stoplights right there, you got 4 ways of traffic, you got a train track, there's a lot going on right there. So good point. Do you know, was it updated in our insurance policy from a risk standpoint, Dr. Freeman?
It hasn't been added yet, so I don't think it's updated, and we will review that with the Risk Retention Trust.
Perfect.
Thank you. And then I guess my final question is, or actually maybe 2 comments to just close, or a comment and a question, is I do think, given the prominence of the sign, that you guys are probably going to receive a lot more requests than have been received in the past. I think it's going to end up being one of the largest kind of advertising spaces, if you will, in the area, besides like the freeway billboard. So I imagine there's going to be significant interest from our community partners and others in this location. So it may be something we need to take a look at, just from the standpoint of how do you guys then determine which community partners get featured. I imagine to this point, demand hasn't really been a consideration. Like, we have a few partners we work with, and we're able to feature their materials in accordance with our existing policy. But if suddenly you find that we have 50 community partners, I don't know, again, how you manage that within our existing policies. And then I guess my final question would be, while I certainly appreciate all the information that's been provided, and I think it will help achieve the goal that we set out to achieve, which is to positively market the district. I guess my question / concern is that it's coming to the board after it's already constructed and bid out. What is the threshold for the board to approve? I imagine it was a construction contract of $180,000 or whatever ordering. What is the threshold for that?
Mr. Rader, right now, the thresholds we've been using have just been procurement thresholds. There hasn't been guidance from the board on any, one particular object of one kind of a expense. What I understood is we used existing shared contracts.
Yeah, Member Rader, we use cooperative purchasing agreements for the purchase of the billboard. That is something we take to the board annually. A list of cooperative purchasing agreements that the district uses, and we were able to use that for our procurement.
No, thank you for that explanation. I still, and again, excuse my own ignorance on this topic, because this is partly my responsibility to know this information. So some of this is me asking because I should know. But under that explanation, if the sign had been $2 million, you're saying that you guys wouldn't have needed to come back before the board because it was procured through a cooperative contract? Like, there's no dollar amount at which you say, wait, that's too much, we would need to go back to the board for this project.
Yeah, Member Rader, I will double check to see if there is a max on a cooperative purchasing agreement, but my understanding is that they have done the procurement. We are a member of the procurement process. They've done the procurement for us, that there is not a max when it comes to a cooperative purchasing agreement. For example, I think we buy $650,000 worth of computers on an annual basis off of a cooperative purchasing agreement. Buses are purchased off cooperative purchasing agreements. But I will double check to make sure there is not a $2 million threshold or?
No, I mean, I don't mean to be facetious or poking. I was just throwing it out there as an example as to in my mind, whether at some point this maybe should have come before the board before it was built. And again, not necessarily an error on your part, just trying to understand my responsibility and a little bit better. So I definitely appreciate the information and the explanation this evening. With that, any additional questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to dynamic digital instruction models and safe return to in-person learning. Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Rader, members of the board. We have, through ESSER, a requirement to have a board meeting on safe return to in-person learning. And you may remember that it had been kind of a standing item on our agenda to have dynamic digital instructional models and the COVID metrics and receive input and guidance from the board on how to move forward given the metrics. Right now, in the state budget, the state legislature has passed some things that do impact this. So one is that students and staff can't be required to wear masks or have vaccinations. That's been taken into consideration as we've redone our mitigation matrix. And on the other hand, ESSER requires us to address the mitigation matrix as part of receiving that federal aid. So what we have done is gone through the last iteration of the matrix, which we showed you. I can't remember which meeting, how many meetings ago. And we have pulled out the most recent data from the county, which if we scroll down a little more, you can see the impact. The blue lines here are the district data and the green lines are the county data. And I think, as I've explained before, the county runs just a little bit separate from the state because the county population is such a big proportion of the state. But what you see here is in the Littleton district, our percent positivity climbing back up to 16, and the trend line over the last couple months is, even though it's zigzagging around a little bit, is trending up. When we looked at when we look at the zip codes around the school district, we see a big difference between the east side and the west side of the district. And when we look at the vaccination rate, we see a little bit of difference between the two major zip codes that include our school district. And so we're seeing a variation in percent positivity from 13 to 22. And our vaccination rate is about a third of the population in those two zip codes that is fully vaccinated. So we do have some concerns about the health and well-being of the community and as the kids as we return to school. As everybody knows, the 12 and under kids haven't been cleared for vaccination yet. So 7th and 8th graders, their families would have the opportunity to get them vaccinated. Given that, we've tried to put together a mitigation matrix for starting the year, and we're currently having discussions about which level of the matrix that we're at. Our aspiration has been to open up in person, and I think we're still leaning that way. There's still a couple weeks before school starts, and it seems like if you talk about the CDC, the World Health Organization, some of the others, and Maricopa County Department of Public Health, that things are changing. Things are changing with the Delta variant, and things are changing with guidance. But if we can pull up the expectations for return mitigation chart, which is attached, what the governing board and public will see is that we've gone from the blue level and the red level down to just 3 models. And Model C is pretty much a remote model. Model A is pretty much an in-person model. And Model B is some variation in between if there's community spread. And so we can kind of go down the middle row is that, and then, go to a more restrictive or less restrictive environment. Model B would say masks are strongly encouraged for students and staff, but the community must wear masks if they're not vaccinated. They're not compelled to work or to attend school. And so to protect our employees and our kids, people coming in, essentially from the neighborhood would still wear the masks. In Model A, masks would be optional. In Model C, we can't require them because of state law, but we would, set up some stringent requirements. Access to curricular resources as we go down the row. The one other change that we did made is we tried to alphabetize these to make them a little more accessible for people who wanted to search. There's not a lot of difference in assessment. Before and after school care is available through community partners, and usually that's along what their rules are. Food service, for instance, when kids weren't in school, we're delivering meals. In the middle column, column B, kids probably would be facing the same direction. They wouldn't have the same social opportunities at lunch. Breakfast in the classroom would still be a given, but you couldn't, for instance, have a salad bar where people shared utensils or anything. But in the green column, we'd be back to having a salad bar with choices for people, with the typical sneeze guards and those kind of things. So we've tried to consider all of the different ways that schools impacted. For the governing board, we would have the board at the DS with a live audience if we were in Model A. We're in Model B right now as we're turning out of the summer, where we have some in-person board, some cabinet, and audience is remote or just at a limited capacity, so we have distancing in the boardroom. If it was Model C, it'd be back to what we were doing before, where everything is remote and being broadcast through an online media. Make your day, how we handle step 4s and parent conferences goes from virtual to in-person. Nursing services and our health wellness checks are more aggressive in B, and in A, they're more standard. Cafeteria, having promotion ceremonies, that was a big question at the end of the year. Not so much for the start of the year, but the adaptation that we made when we were first faced with the pandemic is we had an outside parade celebration, and standard is a recognition ceremony in the caffeinasium. There wasn't a need for a parade because all of the family members could come in. The yellow is a hybrid of that. Offices and coming into public spaces again has different levels of restriction. There's no playground equipment that's going to be used if we're virtual, but we would have playground equipment accessible and have some sanitizing of that. Otherwise, if we're back to in-person and there's not a high level of disease, playground equipment would be accessible as usual from before the pandemic. We would, if we had a high spread or high incidence of disease, restrict volunteer opportunities. In Model B, of course, there aren't a lot of volunteer opportunities if you're fully remote. In Model A, volunteers would be able to resume approved activities. You can see as we go down the list, special areas are either virtual, kids are staying in the room and the teacher comes to them, or they get to travel to the library and the art room, those kind of things. We've looked at special services for resource, reading intervention, exploring potential, which is our gifted program, and how students might be served there. staff travel, use of substitutes, our social workers and teachers on assignment who provide additional support and services, how we would handle transportation and vendors. Without belaboring the fine points and details of all of these, we are required, I think, to present these twice a year, so we will do this at least in July and January. But we really anticipate, the way things are going now, that there will be some changes before January, and we'll be bringing this back. We also anticipate that while this plan sounds good at the discussion level, we have not yet engaged the kids and the parents in the community, and so we may need to make some adjustments. What we think is going to happen is we have this mitigation plan as part of our safe return to school, so people know what kind of things we are and aren't allowing as far as access to the campus and cleaning. We learned a lot during the pandemic. So for instance, 6 feet of social distancing in a K-8 school is not very realistic. You can get to 3 if you keep track of where people are coming and going. You can limit some of the spread in clustering and keeping kids in class groups. So what we anticipate happening is having some restrictions from the community in place to start the year because the metrics are a little higher, that we would have the kids in person, and that if there is the incidence of a communicable virus like COVID, that we would isolate or quarantine the people who were impacted, 1 classroom at a time. If there ended up being several classrooms at a school, we probably would have intervention from the county health department telling us if we had an outbreak or not and what we might need to do in response to that. So what we're thinking right now is we're going to be open. We're going to handle cases of communicable disease on a case-by-case basis, attempting to manage whatever that exposure is while keeping the school open. And again, monitoring how that plan is working and monitoring advice from county, state, and national agencies. So this is our best last draft. We're open to feedback and suggestions from the governing board and the community. What we do plan to do is keep the Google Classroom approach going so that if kids are sick or people need to be remote, instruction can continue. And hopefully look at it as an opportunity where we had kids who stayed home in the past because they had flu or other things and missed school, that at least they can get some school by logging in using their laptop, and if they're not actively participating, they can be passively engaged in keeping up with what's happening in the room. So some opportunity moving forward that way with the models that we developed through the pandemic. Any questions or suggestions?
Questions or feedback from the board?
I don't have any questions right now. I was just reading through the document. So no, I don't have any questions right now.
I don't either. It's very similar. I mean, there's some, but it's pretty much what we saw before, and with some minor changes, but I have no questions.
So my question is, are we in model, I think you said this before, so if the school were to start today, we would be considered in model B?
What we're really talking about right now is trying to, depending on what happens with the metrics. So, we're a little frustrated in that in our region, we have less than 1/3 of the population vaccinated, fully vaccinated, where the state average is a little over 1/2, and that means somewhere in the state there's somebody that's 2/3 because we're only 1/3. And our children are coming to school under 12, which was all but our 2 middle school grades, without even having the opportunity. And the Delta variant is being more aggressive, and of course it has more opportunity in the younger years. So what we don't know for sure, but what we anticipate happening as the start of the school year gets closer, families are going to attend more and more to the needs and consequences that come with coming back to school. So if the start of the school year actually helps improve the vaccination rate in the community, because now that school's starting, you better go get the shot. If it doesn't, and if the percent positivity continues to climb, you know, I think what I said before, our aspiration has been to open under Model A and just close classrooms as we need to. The thing we're discussing right now is access of the community, not the kids and the teachers, but people who want to visit our campus, because the vaccination rate is so low and the positivity rate is climbing, is that we may need to take, you know, a box or two from Model B, like access to the office, while most of the rest of the plan is in Model A. And so, like I said, some of it depends on the behavior of the community. Some of it depends on, you know, how well thought through our plan is, and what we anticipate is it will need to change and be adaptive. Of course, you know, we'll report that in our weekly update to the board. That's the discussion we're currently having. Is what we wanted to do was open school under Model A, but if the metrics and some of the community behavior doesn't change, we may have to retreat to B. We don't know if we have to retreat to the whole column B or just components. And so those discussions are ongoing. We have a couple weeks left, and now with staff returning, we'll be able to have more collaborative discussions.
Wonderful. Actually, thank you so much, Dr. Freeman, for that explanation. That was actually exactly what I was getting at, and kind of the way I was thinking is it might make sense to sample a little bit out of column A, a little bit out of column B. You know, I'd hope, and just based on overall public behavior, I would say the expectation is that we're going to be pretty much in column A, and any attempt to be otherwise would probably be met with some resistance from the community. But, you know, overall, maybe nobody's ready to go back to salad bars that are completely open, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, hopefully there's not any rigidity to the model, that we can take a look at, you know, being as open as we possibly can, and incorporating, you know, additional mitigation measures as necessary. Another one with transportation, like, let's just sanitize twice per day. Like, let's just do that. Like, I don't know if we need to be like, oh, we're in A, we're only sanitizing once per day. Like, I think the world has just generally shifted a bit, that we're going to need that flexibility, and things just might always be a little bit different moving forward. And then what I definitely say is I feel fairly strongly that the board should be back with a live audience at the dais. I certainly understand the mitigation measures, but I go to Costco, I go to the grocery store, I go to city council meetings every week, and you know, it's very much a return to reality. I do feel that the board should conduct its business as normal with the public and with our parents and with our students if desired. So thank you again for this information. Is there any other questions or comments?
No, I just want to make a comment. I would also mimic that Model A is what I would anticipate. And I think without Model A, there would be quite a bit, at least as we speak today. Now that could change, who knows? But right now, definitely Model A, there would be, I believe, a lot of pushback from community if we did not follow Model A. Not to say it couldn't change in a month, who knows? But for now, I do agree Model A is the expectation.
Well, we plan to do in the next couple of weeks a lot of messaging to the community about some of the push to overcome vaccine hesitancy has less to do with the impact on oneself and more to do with the impact on your community. and trying to be responsible to your neighbors and other family members. The risks that have been associated with the vaccine have gotten a lot of press, but what all the doctors are saying is the risks that come with this vaccine are the same risks that come with the disease. Only with the disease, they're 10 times worse. So if you have the one that was last reported from the Johnson & Johnson, and then it appears once in a million people, it appears 10 times in a million people if you get COVID. It's not that it only comes from the vaccine. It comes from having a virus, having a viral infection, or a viral vaccine. So it is important to the community overall if we can increase the level of immunity in the community as part of our responsibility to our kids, to our schools, you know, to our futures. And so we're going to be pushing that message as much as we can, and in order to keep schools and that model open, you know, we agree with that completely. And I know President Nielsen and I really do want the board back at the dais for the next meeting in 2 weeks, as the board discusses their goals and how they want to move forward, to actually have that conversation across the dais as opposed to across the internet. We think that will add a lot of value to come back and have the boardroom open and board members being able to really engage in person-to-person dialogue in the public forum. So we would love to see that as well. Part of the reason we stayed the way we are is because of summer and people traveling and general accessibility of the meeting. That is one thing that has been made easier by having all of these remote things, is that people can attend without the windshield time. But I think, as people would attest, the ability for us to be face-to-face, build relationships, and have dialogue is more effectively served when we're in the same space.
If there's no further comment this evening, I'll move that the governing board adjourn.
I'll second that.
Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.